Alright guys, it is Monday morning. So the body, it is in primer again. And I'm just letting it cure out basically. For the last 2 days we've had some cloudy issues, just like today. So this will be the third day of this crap. We do need the rain though. It's just cloudy and it kind of hit and misses rain, little spitting stuff going on. So I've been wanting to push the car, the body shell out into the sun, let it cook a little bit. It's probably definitely cured enough to sand, but I like my urethane primers to kind of cure out a little bit, you know, shrink up a little bit before I tackle them. But I did have other stuff to do, so I did put it to good use. And I got to say now, after having to take the body back off the frame, I'm kind of glad I did at this point, because all the other little finishing up stuff that I thought that I would just do, you know, with the body shell on, it made it a lot easier having it off. And it's just stuff that I kept putting off, and a couple things I just forgot about. So I ended up using this time to go ahead and finish those. One thing in particular is these body mount covers, these body mount tabs that hang off the frame here. So I'd made these cover plates, and I drilled holes in them, and I've got the chassis drilled and tapped for 1032, and I've got little ARP 12 points to bolt them on. But I've run my battery cable and my fuel line on the outside of the frame rail, and they have to pass through that. So I had to notch these out. I was kind of trying to figure out what to do on those. I originally wanted to do just 2 half circles on it. It's just going to be a little too intricate, so I just made it a little easier and just kind of did it that way. It's wider at one end than the other because the battery cable is pretty massive. But I ended up notching all 4, and they turned out pretty nice, having to notch those like that. And anyway, so those are done. Now these are ready to be, you know, primered and then sanded and then painted, the chassis black. Anyway, I can show you what they look like on. I think I've already showed them before, but this side doesn't have anything going through them, so this is what they look like on. I did leave clearance out around them so they don't rattle or chip or scratch the paint, but they bolt on. Now this side, I did think about just welding it all in and making it all solid and smooth, but it just wouldn't have matched the other side, so that's why I went ahead and made cover plates for both sides, basically. For me, you know, if anything ever happens to a fuel line, like say I run over something and it kicks up here and it, you know, kinks the brake line or fuel line and messes it up, I'll have to pull all this back out to replace it. So I wanted those covers removable, so I have all this room to move that stuff. And also the battery cable, you know, if it, you know, melts or whatever, anything happens to it, it corrodes after time or whatever, I can, you know, replace it easily. But anyway, so I got those knocked out. Now the other problem I ran into, if you've been following this build, I've been trying to hide the wiring on the car. And I don't like the idea of having wiring, you know, with all its nice little colors, or, you know, with the engine being Chevy orange with a little gold pearl in it, having that black weave style, new style loom on it, which I do. I bought a bunch of different sizes of this stuff to use. You know, if I would have just laid a wire across the intake, it would have shown up like crazy because that weave is black. So I made wiring things out of steel, pass-throughs basically, to hide them. So I've made one here, and I've also made one here. Now I did square tubing down here because the cylinder head area and all this down here is more square. So it kind of matches it, but the best part is I will paint this this orange color, so this will pretty much go away. It'll hide, and it's basically a pass-through for wires. These are just mock-up wires. These are just random wires out of my tote full of spares, but this is the same gauge wire as what's going through here. Now my alternator sits here, so this is actually mimicking the exciter wire that goes to the little plug-in. And then there's going to be a bigger power wire that goes to the stud on the back of the alternator, and it has room to go through there as well. Now I'm putting this new style weave loom here on all the wires because I have a ton of this stuff here. This is not the convoluted style. This is the newer style woven or weave or whatever you want to call it. It just looks better. But I'll have it on everything as well, just for a little added protection, so it doesn't get on the edge of one of these tubing deals I made. But none of this stuff's tight, like this one's loose. But anyway, I'd done the bracket here a long time ago. I just never did figure out what to do here, but I finished it up yesterday. This is a piece of 3/4 inch square tubing, and I have quite a few wires that I actually have to go through here to go to my starter solenoid. But as far as the temp sender and the exciter wire and the alternator power wire, they all have to pass through this one. There is plenty of room. I have my harness out here and mocked it all up first. My main engine harness, I have a hole drilled in the firewall on the passenger side. It's like just barely up on the firewall. It's kind of more into the trans tunnel, but the wiring harness passes through here in this area to get behind the head, so it'll, the wires will come down through and go in here. Again, I'll have the loom stuff on it to keep the chafing down, even though I clearance this out for a little added extra. But anyway, this is 1/2 inch square tubing, and I welded tabs to it. The block already had, the engine block already had holes drilled and tapped. This one's 1/4 by 20 up here. This one back here is 5/16 by 18. And I had to cut that one short because the dipstick tube is right in the way. So I originally was going to kick this out around and go in it, but I may actually take it behind the dipstick. There's a little bit of room, and then kick it over. But these will be the orange color, so they'll kind of hide and disappear. So I'm happy with that, got that done. And then I walked around here, and I forgot that I have a sending unit in this cylinder head as well. This one turns the fan on, electric fan on the radiator. The header tubes on this side are kicked more into the block, so even trying to take the wire down, that tube's in the way, so I didn't want the wire to get melted, so it needed to basically go up. So what I did was I used 3/16 brake line. None of the stuff's tight, that's why it's all moving. Anyway, I did 3/16 brake line, and I cut it, bent it, flared the ends. I flared the ends to keep the line from chafing, but anyway, I've actually did some mods to my plug wire loom here. And this brake line wiring pass-through thing actually bolts to this now. So these will be orange. This brake line piece, it will be orange as well. And the valve cover will be orange as well too. This is just primer. But anyway, I was really having trouble trying to figure out how to route that wire and keep it out of sight. And so that's the only thing I really could figure out was that. If you've been watching the channel, you've seen me do a 3/16 brake line just like this that goes, it actually bolts onto the intake here to go to the factory temperature gauge, but it comes through and goes back and kicks down. So it will be painted orange as well. It's in the house, it's in final prime, I've already made it. But I welded 2 tabs on it so it would bolt on. Anyway, so I'll show you what I did here. This had me scratching my head. I mean, this was pretty tough just trying to figure out how to do this. I didn't want to just weld that brake line to that because trying to paint all that cluster of crap would have been really fun. So what I ended up doing was I made it to where it bolts on. This is where the thought process got really kind of stupid at this point. Now these Billet Specialties brake line clamps are 2-piece. This is actually supposed to be the bottom one. This is steel strap that I cut the same width, and I drilled and tapped them 832, which is what this little countersink Allen is. Now these brake line clamps come with a really long bolt, so I used 3/8 long. It's the exact same bolt, it's just 3/8 long. But anyway, I drilled a hole in the opposite end of this piece of steel strap, and I plug welded it on, but also put a couple of tacks off the bottom down here because you don't really see them. But anyway, so these bolt on, and so I can paint all these separate and then bolt it together. But when you get to looking at it, it just looks like a 2-piece Billet Specialties brake line clamp, and it actually just bolts on. So, I think I spent more time just trying to figure out how I was going to do it, but there's probably 10 other ways of doing it, but that's the only thing I could come up with that I actually liked. But anyway, once that's on there, you really kind of don't see it because it's kind of behind that. But all that stuff will be painted the Chevy orange, so it'll kind of hide. But if you do get to looking at it, really inspecting it, it does look pretty clean at the end of the day. So I'm pretty happy with it. I'm kind of happy with the way it turned out. It looks pretty clean. And I like making things. It's just more. I've got a lot of handmade parts on this car, and I'm proud of them, because I made them. It's nothing I bought off a shelf. It's just stuff I made. But it's just the way I had to be, because I don't have the money to go buy all this stuff off the shelf. I have to make things. But anyway, I got the carburetor is final bolted on. The fuel lines are all tight. I got the distributor in. So I've got quite a bit of stuff done. This TV cable bracket, throttle valve bracket, kick down bracket, whatever you want to call it for the transmission. This is all made out of strap, and it's all painted and everything. Now I did have to drill a hole in my carburetor flange. Put a little 632 Allen button in there. I didn't drill a hole all the way through the base plate. It just goes about halfway, and it's basically to keep the wiggle out of the bracket. We just having that on there, so it kind of keeps it in place. But I did a little knife blade look here piece, and I drilled step speed holes in it. And it's basically just, the speed holes are just what I got in the car on a lot of stuff, but it's a carb spring deal is all it is. But I like how I've got the carb spring and the TV cable bracket all as one unit. There's nothing, no carb spring going up here. It's just clean looking. Anyway, so in case you're looking for MSD HEI distributor, which I have run quite a few of these Street Fire HEIs. These are the $160 or $70 units. Comes with a coil and everything. It doesn't come with this cap piece. This is something I got off a front-wheel drive Cadillac. But anyway, I never knew it. I just happened to find it by accident when I was getting ready to buy this one. I have a bunch of these red HEI distributor caps from buying all these MSD Street Fire HEIs over the years and then changing them from red to black caps. You can buy the freaking distributor with a black cap with the copper terminals now, so that's freaking awesome. I don't remember what the part number is, but if you get to looking, they do have it with the black cap already, so I didn't have another red cap hanging around. I got it all as one thing there. So, but I think they've kind of messed with these a little bit, because used to you'd have to put your original HEI heavy springs in here because the counterweight unit was real sloppy. But they must have altered it a little bit. They don't have heavy springs in them, and it's really, really nice, and it's kind of tight. It's not real floppy at all. So they must have redesigned something in there. So I noticed that on the last one I got too. I bought the distributor for this car, but I ended up putting it in my Buick Regal project, and then I sold it. So I had to buy a new distributor for this one. So in case you're looking for a distributor with a black cap, you can now buy the MSD Street Fire HEI with that. So anyway, I do have the carburetors completely bolted down, fuel lines tight, the air cleaners mocked up with the stud and everything. I've got to go back and block sand this and then do a bunch of putty work. I've got pinholes and craters and pits everywhere. So there's quite a bit of work to do to this before I paint it gloss black. But I kind of ran into another issue with this thing. Now originally when I mocked this car up, I bought a 670 Holley Street Avenger carburetor for this thing. And I had everything done, mocked up, and ready to go. I think I ended up using that Holley on another car and sold it, so I ended up having to buy another carburetor, but I ended up buying a Demon. Now I like Demon carburetors. I've had quite a few through the years, and if you've ever had one, they're basically just a revised version of a Holley. Now I am a Holley guy to the bone, just because I have learned things personally through the years from messing with Edelbrocks and going to Holleys. There's quite a bit of difference between the carburetors. It's just some people love them, some people don't. But I do have to say, if you have a big giant cam in your car and you put on an Edelbrock, for me it always seemed to kind of tone it down a little bit. But the Holleys with the four-corner idle just kind of help out a little bit. It kind of gives the cam a little bit more presence. Makes it a little bit more choppy, basically, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But you hear it more. But anyway, that's a debate. Don't even want to get into. I'm a Holley guy, and that's it. I'm not an Edelbrock guy. Now, I can say for certain, Demon makes a carburetor, and I can't remember what that thing's called. Road Demon, I think, or something. It looks like an Edelbrock Carter, AFB style carburetor, but it's a Demon. and it comes with a composite body. Like the whole main body's that black composite plastic. I bought one of those from Summit because it seems like it was only like $2.99 one time. This was quite a few years ago, and I put it on my daily driver. It was a stock Goodwrench 350, 80, I don't even remember what year that El Camino was. 80 El Camino, I think. I think it was an 80. But anyway, it's an El Camino SS, Goodwrench 350, and I put that Edelbrock, or that Demon style, it looks like an Edelbrock carb on there. Holy smoke. That was a fantastic carburetor for a stock engine. It has smaller primaries in the front, so it gives you a lot of throttle response, very crisp, low end with them smaller primaries. But the composite body, you don't have to run the phenolic spacer for, like today's ethanol fuels, you get a little fuel boil, percolation, vapor lock, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, I always run phenolics, but I didn't have to run a phenolic with that composite body Demon. But I think those Demons ended up going up to $350 or something now. But when I bought mine, it was $2.99. It was really inexpensive, and it was just kind of a shot in the dark to try it. And I actually love that carburetor. So if you're an Edelbrock guy, I would highly recommend that Demon that looks like it, because it is a fantastic carburetor. It did seem like it was fat on that stock Goodwrench 350 a little bit, because I had just a stock style HEI, and I ended up, it's just like the Edelbrock. You have to buy that stupid plastic, toolkit thing that has all the needles and stuff in it, and I had to tone it down a little bit on the needles, which is easy. It just does it from the top. You don't have to take the carb off or nothing, but I did change those out. But anyway, I got off subject here off my 55, but anyway, the thing that bit me on the butt when I went from a Holly to a Demon, there's, the fuel line on a Demon, the inlet ports for your fuel line are smaller on a Demon than a Holly, so I had to buy this unit again. It kind of sucks, because that was a pretty expensive piece, so now I have an extra one for a Holly laying around here. But I had to modify my kickdown bracket, so I actually had it painted and everything. I think it was done. So then I ended up having to cut it down and modify it to make it work again. And then the other thing I got into was the wing nut stud. This Demon has a 5/16 by 18 hole in the center of it. And every carburetor known to man has a 1/4 by 20 stud on it for a wing nut. So I went to put my hood-barred wing nut on and everything, and I had to buy the little adapter piece to go in the carburetor. Mr. Gasket makes a kit. It comes with that little adapter piece that's 5/16 by 18 that screws into the carb, and then the outlet is a female, basically, for your 1/4 by 20 stud to go into. It was very inexpensive, and it even came with a cheesy little wing nut that I ended up throwing away. But anyway, so now I have my air cleaner on and my wing nut on, and I'm not looking forward to all the body work and putty work I got to do to this air cleaner, because it's going to be intricate going around all these ribs, but I got to do it. The other thing I did on this thing, I noticed when I went to screw my wing nut on, this is base coat, clear coat, just silver. I noticed as I started to tighten it that it was starting to tear up the primer on that air cleaner. So I didn't want to do that in paint, so what I did was I drilled the hole out bigger and I put a little bushing in there. And it's a 1/4 inch ID for the stud, so it fits the stud very, very well. But I just had to open that up a little bit, so I put a little bushing in there basically, and the wing nut goes right on it. And it's actually the same diameter as the wing nut stem I made, so it worked out awesome. It's just something I had here, so now it won't tear up the paint after I get everything all painted and done. But anyway, guys, I guess that's it. That's almost close to 20 minutes there, but I started to assemble my alternator, but when I tightened up the screws in the alternator, it chipped the paint everywhere I put one of them bolts, so I ended up having to strip it to bare metal and start over. I bought for my alternator case halves, I bought these little chrome button head Allens to put the case halves back together. But anyway, I over tightened it, and it chunked the paint out in all four corners, so I took it back off and stripped the forward case back to bare metal. I gotta go back and repaint it. But anyway, guys, I guess that's pretty much it. I guess I'll get to sanding on the car. There's not much more I can do. So anyway, there's the update on the 55.